Welcome to Heaven's Law, where we uncover the hidden stories of angels, demons, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. Today, we venture into one of Scripture's most enigmatic mysteries, a cosmic battle fought not over kingdoms or souls, but over the lifeless body of Moses himself. Why would the Archangel Michael clash with Lucifer over mortal remains? What forbidden knowledge lies buried in this ancient tale? The answer reveals truths about divine authority, the nature of death, and secrets the Church rarely discusses. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more forbidden knowledge from the celestial realms. In the desolate peaks of Mount Nebo, where the winds carry whispers of eternity and the earth touches heaven's threshold, Moses the lawgiver drew his final breath. For 40 years, he had wandered the wilderness, bearing the weight of divine revelation upon his shoulders. The tablets of the covenant had passed through his hands, the voice of the Almighty had thundered in his ears, and now, at 120 years, his eyes remained undimmed, his vigor unabated. Yet death came calling, but this was no ordinary death. The Scriptures tell us that God himself buried Moses in a valley in the land of Moab, yet no man knows his burial place to this day. Why such secrecy? Why would the Creator personally attend to the burial of mortal flesh? The answer lies in what Moses had become, not merely a prophet or leader, but a vessel transformed by direct communion with the divine. For 80 days upon Mount Sinai, Moses had dwelt in the presence of God. The ancient texts whisper that his face shone with such radiance that the Israelites could not bear to look upon him. His body had been transfigured, touched by the very essence of creation itself. This was no ordinary clay returning to dust. This was sanctified flesh, a relic of immense power that both heaven and hell coveted. The moment Moses' spirit departed, the cosmic order shifted. Angels descended like falling stars, their wings casting shadows across the mountainside. But they were not alone. From the abyss came another presence, ancient and terrible, claiming rights that predated the foundations of the world. Lucifer, the morning star, the first among the fallen, had come to collect what he believed was rightfully his. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through eternity. On one side stood Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the children of men, captain of the heavenly host, sword of divine justice. On the other, Lucifer, beautiful and terrible in his rebellion, wielding arguments as sharp as any blade. Between them lay the cooling corpse of the greatest prophet who ever lived, and the fate of more than mortal flesh hung in the balance. What transformed this burial into a battlefield? What made Moses' body worth fighting for? The ancient sources speak of knowledge too dangerous for mortal minds, of words spoken between God and his chosen servant that were never meant to be repeated. Moses had not merely received the law, he had been initiated into mysteries that could reshape reality itself. Michael the Archangel stands as heaven's greatest warrior, yet his true power lies not in strength of arm, but in unwavering righteousness. His name itself poses a question that has echoed through the ages: who is like God? Born from divine thought before the foundations of the world were laid, Michael embodies pure obedience, perfect justice, and absolute loyalty to the divine will. He is the champion of order, the guardian of sacred law, the one who stands between creation and chaos. Ancient traditions describe Michael as bearing a sword of living fire, his wings spanning the breadth of heaven itself. Yet it is his role as psychopomp guide of souls that makes him central to our tale. When the righteous die, it is Michael who shepherds their spirits to their eternal reward. He is the angel of the covenant, protector of Israel, and the one appointed to stand guard over those who bear God's mark upon their foreheads. But Michael's opponent in this cosmic drama was no mere demon. Lucifer, whose name means light-bearer or morning star, was once the most beautiful of all angelic beings. Before his fall, he held dominion over music and worship in heaven's throne room. His voice could make the stars sing in harmony, and his beauty was said to rival the glory of God himself. Yet pride became his poison, and ambition his downfall. When Lucifer fell, he did not lose all his former attributes. He retained his intelligence, his charisma, and most dangerously, his knowledge of divine law. This makes him the most formidable of adversaries, not because he opposes God's will through ignorance, but because he understands it perfectly and chooses rebellion anyway. He is legalism weaponized, law turned to darkness, divine knowledge perverted to serve selfish ends. In their confrontation over Moses' body, these two beings represent opposing approaches to divine authority. Michael embodies submission to God's will, regardless of personal understanding or desire. His every action flows from perfect trust in divine wisdom. Lucifer, by contrast, represents the desire to understand everything, to subject even God's commands to rational analysis, to claim equality with the Creator through knowledge. The battleground between them was not merely physical, but philosophical. Here stood the fundamental question that has driven every theological debate since the beginning. Does might make right, or does right make might? Does God command things because they are good, or are things good because God commands them? In the person of Michael stood divine decree. In Lucifer, divine reason turned rebellious. Yet there was more at stake than abstract theology. Moses' body represented something unprecedented in the cosmic order mortal flesh that had been transformed by direct divine contact. The man who spoke with God face to face, who received the law written by the finger of the Almighty, whose face shone with borrowed glory, what power might reside in such sanctified remains? Both angels knew that whoever controlled Moses' body would possess a relic of immense significance. But their motivations could not have been more different. Michael sought to protect the dignity of God's servant and prevent the desecration of what the divine hand had made holy. Lucifer saw opportunity, a chance to corrupt what God had sanctified, to prove that even the most blessed could be turned to darkness. The confrontation began not with the clash of swords, but with words. For this was a battle of law as much as power. Lucifer approached the burial site with the confidence of one who had studied divine jurisprudence for eons. His argument was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Moses was a murderer, and by divine law, murderers belong to the domain of death. Remember, Lucifer whispered with the voice of shifting sand and dying stars, how your precious lawgiver struck down the Egyptian taskmaster. Blood was upon his hands, violence in his heart. By the very commandments he carried down from Sinai, thou shalt not kill, he stands condemned. What right does heaven have to this flesh that broke heaven's own decree? The accusation cut deeper than any blade. Here was law turned against itself, divine command weaponized against divine purpose. Lucifer had found the perfect paradox, using God's own standards to claim authority over God's chosen servant. It was brilliant, diabolical, and according to the strict letter of the law, technically correct. Michael stood silent for a moment that stretched across eternity. The weight of justice pressed upon him, for he could not deny the facts of Moses' past. The man who had delivered the law had indeed broken it. The prophet who proclaimed divine mercy had indeed acted in violent anger. How could perfection claim what was imperfect? How could light embrace what darkness had touched? Yet Michael's response revealed the profound difference between divine and demonic reasoning. He did not attempt to argue Moses' innocence or justify the killing of the Egyptian. Instead, he spoke words that have echoed through theological discourse ever since. The Lord rebuke you. In that simple phrase lay a theology that transcended legalism, the recognition that mercy stands higher than law, that grace transforms what justice condemns. But Lucifer was not finished. His second argument struck at the heart of divine authority itself. "This body bears the mark of divinity," he hissed, "but divinity shared is divinity diminished. When your God allowed mortal flesh to shine with heavenly glory, he broke the barrier between sacred and profane. By divine law, what touches earth belongs to earth's prince. I claim my ancient right as ruler of this fallen world." Here was the deeper game revealed. This was not merely about Moses, but about the nature of the incarnation itself, the dangerous precedent of divine essence dwelling in mortal flesh. If God could inhabit humanity without surrendering his claim to it, what did that mean for every soul torn between heaven and earth? If flesh could be sanctified without losing its earthly nature, what power might such transformation hold? The debate raged across dimensions human minds cannot fathom. Legal precedents from before the dawn of creation were cited. Divine statutes older than the stars themselves were invoked. Lucifer's arguments grew more sophisticated, more desperate, as he sensed his case slipping away. He spoke of the cosmic balance, the necessity of death's dominion, the chaos that would ensue if exceptions were made to universal law. But Michael's silence grew more profound with each accusation, for he understood what his opponent could not, that they were not arguing about law at all, but about love. The body of Moses was not claimed by legal right, but by divine affection. God had chosen to bury his servant, not because the law demanded it, but because love desired it. And against love, all the logic of hell must ultimately fall silent. The turning point came when Lucifer overplayed his hand. In his fury at Michael's refusal to engage in legal debate, he began to rail against God himself, questioning divine motives, challenging heavenly wisdom, demanding equality with the Creator. In that moment, he revealed the true source of his rebellion, not a love of justice, but an inability to accept his place in the created order. Why did God personally bury Moses, and why was his burial place hidden from human knowledge? The answer touches the very heart of divine mystery and reveals truths that most believers are never taught. Moses was not simply buried, he was preserved, transformed, kept from the corruption that claims all mortal flesh. His body became a bridge between the earthly and heavenly realms, a testament to what mortal flesh could become when touched by divine glory. Ancient sources speak of Moses' transfiguration during his 40 days upon Mount Sinai. The radiance that shone from his face was not merely reflected light, but a fundamental alteration of his physical being. He had become something unprecedented in the created order, humanity infused with divinity, yet remaining human. This was not full deification, but a foretaste of the resurrection that would one day transform all creation. Lucifer understood the implications better than any earthly theologian ever could. If Moses' body could be preserved from corruption, if mortal flesh could bear divine glory without being destroyed, then death itself was not the final word. The very existence of such transformed humanity threatened hell's entire foundation. For if one human could transcend the grave while remaining human, what did that mean for the rest of humanity? This is why the battle was fought in secret, why no human witness was permitted. The knowledge was too dangerous, the precedent too radical. Common believers were not ready to understand that the barrier between mortality and immortality was more permeable than they imagined. They needed to focus on moral living and faithful obedience, not on the cosmic implications of divine human fusion. The hidden burial also served another purpose. It prevented Moses' body from becoming an object of worship. Throughout the Old Testament, we see humanity's tendency to worship the messenger rather than the message, to venerate the symbol rather than the reality it represents. The bronze serpent Moses crafted in the wilderness eventually had to be destroyed because people began offering sacrifices to it. How much more dangerous would it have been if they had access to Moses' transformed remains? Yet there is an even deeper layer to this mystery. Some ancient traditions suggest that Moses' body was not merely preserved, but prepared for a future purpose. Just as Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying, and Elijah ascended in a chariot of fire, Moses occupied a unique position in the cosmic order. His body was too sacred for earth, too material for heaven, a paradox that could only be resolved through divine intervention. The battle between Michael and Lucifer thus represented competing visions of humanity's ultimate destiny. Lucifer saw Moses' transformation as an aberration, a violation of natural order that needed to be corrected. Death was supposed to be universal, corruption inevitable, the grave inescapable. Michael defended not just Moses' body, but the principle that divine love could transcend natural law, that grace could accomplish what justice alone never could. This theological tension explains why the story appears only briefly in Jude's epistle and is largely absent from mainstream Christian teaching. The implications are too radical, the questions too unsettling. If Moses' body could be preserved from corruption through divine power, what does that say about the nature of the resurrection? If mortal flesh can bear divine glory, what are the true possibilities for human transformation? The answer points toward the ultimate mystery, the incarnation itself. In Moses, we see a preview of what would later be fully realized in Christ, divine nature dwelling in human flesh without destroying its humanity. The battle over Moses' body was thus a rehearsal for the cosmic conflict that would rage around the cross and the empty tomb. The victory belonged to Michael, but not through force of arms. When Lucifer's arguments collapsed under the weight of their own contradictions, when his legal challenges gave way to desperate blasphemy, the archangel spoke the words that ended the confrontation. "The Lord rebuke you." Not "I rebuke you" or "heaven rebukes you," but "the Lord rebuke you." In that phrase lay the recognition that ultimate authority belongs not to created beings, no matter how mighty, but to the Creator alone. Lucifer departed, but his defeat was not absolute. He had learned something valuable in his confrontation with Michael, that humanity possessed potential far beyond what he had previously understood. If one human could be transformed into something approaching the divine while remaining human, then his war against heaven had to take a different form. He could not simply corrupt human bodies. He had to corrupt human hearts, minds, and souls before their potential could be realized. This explains the intensification of spiritual warfare in the generations following Moses. The knowledge that transformation was possible made the stakes infinitely higher. Every human soul became a potential Moses, every life a possible bridge between earth and heaven. Lucifer's strategy shifted from outright dominion to subtle subversion, from commanding obedience to whispering doubts about divine love and human worth. But Michael's victory established a precedent that would echo through biblical history. When Enoch walked with God and was taken up without dying, Michael was there to ensure safe passage. When Elijah ascended in the chariot of fire, it was Michael who opened heaven's gates. When Christ himself rose from the dead with a body both physical and transformed, Michael stood ready to enforce divine decree against any who would challenge the resurrection. The hidden burial of Moses thus becomes a key to understanding the entire arc of redemptive history. It reveals that God's ultimate plan was never simply to save souls from bodies, but to redeem humanity in its entirety, body, soul, and spirit. The resurrection is not an escape from physical existence, but its ultimate transformation. Modern believers often struggle with the implications of this ancient battle. We prefer our theology neat and systematic, our afterlife either purely spiritual or completely physical. The idea that Moses exists somewhere between earth and heaven, his body preserved in a state beyond normal human comprehension, challenges our categories and comfort zones. Yet this discomfort points to a crucial truth. The mystery of God's love transcends human understanding. The battle over Moses' body was not ultimately about law or precedent or cosmic order. It was about a creator's refusal to let death have the final word over what he had made, called, and loved. It was about grace triumphing over justice, love conquering law, and hope defying despair. In our own age of scientific materialism and spiritual skepticism, the story of Michael's victory offers profound comfort. It reminds us that we are not merely biological machines destined for extinction, nor disembodied souls awaiting escape from physical existence. We are beings with the potential for transformation, called to a destiny that transcends the limitations of both mortality and pure spirituality. The next time you face the reality of death, your own mortality or that of loved ones, remember Moses on Mount Nebo. Remember that God himself attended his burial, that Michael defended his body against the claims of darkness, that somewhere beyond human sight and understanding, the great lawgiver awaits the resurrection in a state of being we can barely imagine. In that hidden truth lies hope for every human heart that has ever wondered whether love is stronger than death. The battle between Michael and Lucifer over Moses' body reveals the forbidden secret at the heart of human existence. We are not merely fallen creatures awaiting judgment, but beloved children of God, destined for transformation that makes even angels wonder. That is why heaven fought for Moses' flesh, why hell coveted it, and why the story was hidden from all but the most mature believers. Some truths are too precious, too dangerous, and too wonderful for casual consumption. They must be protected until hearts are ready to receive them without being destroyed by their glory.